want to do music. I want to be a creative person. And anything else I do would be to do something less than what I think I'm meant to do. So when y'all asked me to do it, it was a dream come true. I was born in 1975, and my earliest memories would be like 1977, 78, which would have been the height of the disco craze. I was living with my parents in a small town in Wisconsin, and they would drive to Minnesota at night, give me a babysitter, and go disco dancing. They would try to find these records that they loved dancing to, and they built a little collection. And my dad had one of those, really old, like the big old wood speakers and, like the old Marantz amplifier. And so my parents would practice dancing in the living room, listening to these disco records they found. And there was this one. It's called The Devil's Gun by this Detroit band called CJ and Company. Terrific band. And Tom Wilton produced this record for him. It's got like a house thump like you wouldn't believe. And so my parents would dance this record. It had like some sound effects in it. And so, it's called, fee, fi, fo, fum. You're looking down the barrel of the devil's gun, which I loved as a 3-year-old. What's this all about? And so those are some of my earliest memories. I think both the music, that pulsation, the pump, and then the sort of sci-fi-ness of it, and then just my parents' joy, like seeing my parents, dancing and happy together. As life became more complicated, that is a nice memory for me. They were super in love and really happy. My mom would talk to me a lot about disco because one day they tried to go to the club and it closed and the format had changed. And that was after the disco demolition in Chicago. And they burned all those disco records in a really hateful act. And so my mom would talk to me a lot about disco when I was young because, America's a rock and roll country, especially in, the early 80s and stuff. And, she would just impart a little wisdom on me, she'd say how important Latin rhythms were, or she would talk to me about black music, or she would talk to me about orchestration and how disco was actually some of the most complex and beautiful music that had been made, and so she kind of destigmatized it for me because she really felt it had been stigmatized in a lot of really unfair ways. So I think, already I was kind of learning an alternative way of looking at things because I was about to have to deal with Guns N' Roses and, all that stuff of the late 80s and trying to be a kind of soft feminine person within that teenage paradigm was strange. So I had my own musical values, I think because of my mom. My mom's an antiques dealer. So I always had this we were always talking about time and the river of time and how and sort of appreciation for human cultural change. So I definitely had a sense, I would say by about 1993, that what I was experiencing was something that was truly extraordinary, very fragile, and probably not going to last that long in the form that I was experiencing it, but that it had tremendous potency. I remember in the 90s, I would say, they're going to study this music in schools someday. And now it's wonderful. Now we see there is actually quite a dialogue about dance music and electronic music, and there's people who've gone and gotten their PhDs in cultural studies related to dance music. So, I think it was right. I don't know how I heard that raves were happening. I was into electronic music already, so I really loved industrial music, and I loved synth pop. Those were my first loves. And then I was hearing on these kind of more commercial house mixes on the radio, I loved the drum breaks and I loved some of the sounds. So I liked house music, but not necessarily had it presented in the way it would be at an underground club. Somehow I got myself to a rave in 1993. And as I remember it, at Gramophone Records, the promoters would put out their little flyers. And the first party I went to was called Dura Rave. So it was like a Duracell battery. It's a Dura Rave on it. And so I found a friend in my hometown who had a car and a parent who was not totally paying attention. So I was like, Mom, Dad, I'm gonna go sleep over at Greg's. And then Greg and my friend Andre and I, we went to We drove ourselves to this, party. And I want to say I must have been like 17, I think, maybe when this was happening. I know there was some kind of pilgrimage I wanted to make. The promise of rave, of this idea of like that music could kind of reach a higher state of consciousness. That the thing that I loved industrial music, but it was at the time very hyper masculine, and there was this way of sort of it was a lot about the shadow of life, which is its power, and I love industrial music. But I was in rave and in house. I do think I was looking for something that reached more towards the ecstatic, something that had a strong feminine side, something that was not just about sort of expressing frustration and anger, but maybe had some hope. It's hard to look back on yourself and try to what was my mental state at the time, but I was looking for something. I felt like an alien in my high school. I was a closeted feminine person, queer in a way that was like kind of not a queerness I even, like being a trans lesbian is not something in 1994 someone even told me you could be, So the feelings swirling inside me were not something I could really share with anyone. I liked different music than everybody in my high school. My actual friends were from other high schools in the area, which is like pretty unusual back then because most people just hung out with the other kids at their high school. And so, yeah, I don't know. I was on some mission to try to find some other people like me and to kind of define myself outside of my hometown, that sort of thing. So Dura Rave's happening in 1993. Chicago house has been a thing since the mid 80s, and this rave scene doesn't happen without house music, or at least not in the form we know it. So it was an interesting thing in Chicago because you had a very developed, very sophisticated, and a second generation house music scene. At the same time, people are curious to try to throw a rave. So there were warehouse parties for house music. Like Lil Louis would throw these huge warehouse parties, just house music. But people are now throwing raves in these same spaces with slightly different music or slightly different priorities, a little different dress and things like this. So the rave scene's getting layered on top of this scene that already exists. And at 93, this is in its infancy, this kind of like collision. So when I went to the party, it was lots of different kinds of people. There were definitely some kids there like me who were like curious about raves. Although I should tell you, I went in combat boots and like my Frontline Assembly t-shirt, And so there were a lot of kids there like that, like all different sort of like subcultures, of American teenagehood. And there were a lot of like kids from the city there. And, house music was like on the radio and drive time mixes and very much like, music of the city, and so like popular music of the city, so there were like all different kinds of kids. There were people there, with their boyfriends and button-down shirts, as well as, freaks and geeks and stuff. Well, anyway, so all night is the fast techno, right? Because this is a rave. And the DJ who, I think, was a Chicago DJ. I don't think there were like out of town people here. I'm pretty sure it was this DJ Hector Lopez, but I don't know for sure. He decides to play a Chicago classic, and not just like a house classic, but an actual freestyle track, which, so he drops this freestyle track after a few hours of like faster hardcore techno, and the room erupts. Because truly, this is the music of like at least half the people are there. This is the music they fall in love to. This is like the kind of vernacular music of the city, these big romantic songs, these torch song freestyle tracks, So everyone starts dancing because it was almost like sort of people didn't know what to do with the other music. And then a huge gang fight breaks out. We're all tripping. The fight kind of breaks up, and then something like 10, 15, I don't know, memory's strange. It has a way of multiplying things, but a lot of paddy wagons are outside the party. And so me and my friends, by by some luck, slip out of there. And I'll never forget how the music shifted this vibrational thing, both in a way that was celebratory and romantic and sweet, but also caused a fight because it got everyone riled up. And I think that collision of cultures was a huge part of what characterized the Chicago scene at the time. It was maybe 6 months or a year before I went to another rave, because I mean that was kind of an intense experience. It wasn't exactly what I expected it to be. So I think it was the following winter. It was '94 for sure, and I started like becoming a raver in earnest. The party itself was so special. I've not experienced a setup like this since, and this wasn't unusual in Chicago at the raves. So what they would do is they would use an old theater, but instead of setting it up like you would for a concert or a theater performance, they would put a full wall of sound at the very back of the stage, right? And then everyone would dance in front of the wall of the sound on the stage. So instead of being the audience, the entertained, the consumer, all of a sudden they're the ones on the stage just with the system. And then the DJ would play on the balconies or in the lighting booth or, somewhere behind you. And it was always one of the first questions, where is the DJ? Where the DJ was more of a curiosity, a detail. We all wanted to dance facing into these black monoliths, And so, like a good rave, minimally lit. So really, you're dancing with all these people and all that's in front of you is vibrating blackness, So my friend and I, we take a few sugar cubes of this wonderful acid that we'd gotten from like a deadhead back then in the 90s. This was a really good strategy. You want some good psychedelics, Knowing someone who was following the dead was like a good strategy. So anyway, my friend Cece's got to go home because she's got the parents' car. She's getting nervous, and I honestly think she was a little bored because she was our designated driver. So we all pile in the car, and James and I are super ecstatic. I mean, we're so lit up, and we're so excited, and the music is still in our bodies, And it's not the best drive home. It was super foggy out. So I think it was like kind of change of seasons because the night was cold and that was releasing a lot of humidity. It's like we were driving through clouds. Poor CC, couldn't see anything. So she's got the air conditioner on full blast, trying to deal with the fogging windows, the conditions, and then the two of us goofballs in back trying to hold it together. And so we're basically trying to be quiet, and so all we're listening to is this air conditioner. She's got the music off because she's nervous. And we start hearing the oscillations in the air conditioner, and that way when you listen to sound and you listen to it more, you start to hear its constituent parts, So anyways, we're starting to hear cycle and rhythm in it, although neither of us are acknowledging this to each other. And then my friend, and then it's like, it sounds just like the party. And we sort of hear those same kick drums and the oscillation. And then it's like, my friend looks at me and goes, it's the Motherbeat. And I was like, and it was like, but we're like kind of giggling and just like it was like just a sweet moment. I was like, yeah, yes, the Motherbeat. Meaning just like this fundamental pulsation that's in the air conditioner and in the party. The party's in the air conditioner. That oneness that you can experience in psychedelics in such like a unique way, the dethronement of categories, the dissolution of boundaries, seeing the interconnectedness of things. Like we had that moment together. And I'll never forget, Cece was so nervous and so frustrated with us. She dropped us off on a street corner. We had to walk back to my parents, and it was, at that moment, I was more just nervous about getting us home, getting us safe. But the Motherbeat then really became sort of a guiding principle for me for the rest of my life, and is still, of course, something I talk about today. I think there is this sort of central pulsation or set of resonances that is in nature, it's in our music, and it has a profound effect on our physiology and our psyche and our relationships and our relationship to nature and each other. So Motherbeat.
I got a brim of water to keep some of the records in.
Yeah, I mean, usually for me, things that were direct expressions of femininity, I kept that stuff very neatly curated. I understood where I could kind of get away with things, where I couldn't. There was a lot of private rituals, a lot of private rituals, a lot of things I would do starting even when I was like 7 that were to express that I shared with no one. So to finally to go to a rave and people are dancing with themselves or dancing with the music, you know. I'd never, like, I would try to go dance at the, you know, the school dance or whatever, and people are trying to kind of hook up, and, you know, and the rave deprioritized that. It was much more of a, like, you know, everyone's okay here as the ideal, not always in reality, of course, but, so when I went raving, it felt like, the music there had a very strong feminine spirit, much like disco. There wasn't this coupling of dancing. There were not rules about dancing, so it was up to you how you wanted to dance. And while ravers would sort of emulate each other in this sort of natural and kind of sweet process of being like, oh, I like it, kind of like their moves, you know, and maybe I want to dance, or like, how should I dance? I want to dance like them. You know, it was about your just the freedom of movement. And so I think for someone who was really being careful about how they moved through the world and how much of themselves they showed, and was already, even though they weren't out, being just utterly criticized for being feminine and ostracized, and having to fight sometimes, and having to stand up for myself in situations I should have never had to be in. Which is why all this stuff about trans kids is so fucking frustrating right now. But anyways, I digress. To have a space where I could dress a little different, move in a gentle way, move in a feminine way, and where I didn't, you know, and where other people seemed to be celebrating in that too. You know, that was an incredible, you know, revelation for me. And then, you know, sometimes raving is just like 3 years of a person's life, or this music scene will be really important to them at a certain time, but then they kind of move on to other things, you know. I had, in my first year of raving, I just got into some trouble. I mean, you know, I was 18, I was rebelling. I went to like undergrad and then got like kicked out because I was just not going to class. I was like raving all the time. And I got into a relationship that was like, had problems because we were both partying too much. And then I was like really getting in deep with drugs in a way that was negative. You know, I'm actually quite proud and comfortable to say I do psychedelics. I think it's medicine when done right. And it certainly helped me to be the person I am. But, you know, there's other drug experiences. I use my power of differentiation here, you know. So I'd gotten in a kind of a dark place, so I tried to kind of, like, in a sense, kind of clean myself up. You know, I was like, okay, going back to school, gonna take this seriously this time. I'm gonna quit with the really intense drugs. I'm maybe, you know, not gonna go out every weekend. I was, you know, I'd gotten so into house music at this point. I was really enjoying going to house parties and starting to do a little bit of DJing myself. So things were like shifting in my life. But, you know, but I didn't come out, and I didn't know what to do. You know, I'd had this powerful experience. I'd had experienced this beautiful rave subculture at a really peak time in '94, before the scene started changing around me. And it's like I kind of tried to live like a normal life, you know. I went to law school. I worked for a pharmaceutical company for a while. I was married at one point, you know. Before I you know, and I just and it didn't work for me. There was always I always felt like a fish out of water. It was like being, you know, it's like being in high school again, where it's like other people's values were kind of like dominating my decisions a bit. And, you know, being an adult's weird. Having to take care of yourself is like real stuff, you know, getting a job and like trying to navigate the world. And I received so much negative reinforcement about creativity and I don't know if this would be true other places, but in America, it was a lot of kind of like, you know, my mom being like, hey, I know you really like this, but how are you going to support yourself? You know, and more so, unless you could monetize music, and up until the point you did, it wasn't really viewed as something an adult should be spending most of their time and energy doing, at least within some families and within certain, there's some kind of class issues there as well. But I certainly felt like it was this thing that was something, a little bright light in my life that I kept alive during that time. And that kept reminding me that this sort of matrix I had embedded myself into, that there was still this other part of me, you know. And so the music, I would still express a lot in this, through this music, even though my life looked very kind of gray and different back then. So it was kind of the thing that kept me connected to community and creativity, and to eventually I was like, enough of all this. Like, I'm a lifer, I'm a trans woman, you know, fine, I can go to law school, I don't want to do it. I want to do music, I want to be a creative person. And anything else I do would be to do something less than what I think I'm meant to do, whatever that means.
You gotta dig a Sesame Skin record, but it's not.
Maya and I played Lowlands Festival in the Netherlands. This is like a big rock festival that also takes its dance stages very seriously. I think it's the most people we've ever played for. It might have been 12,000 people in a hangar that you could put 3 747s in, right? But this sound team was so amazing that this room sounded incredible. I could hear details in the records like you never normally hear. The high end was like perfectly preserved. So we're up on this stage just kind of like mind blown at how the music sounds, even though it was like quite a kind of intimidating, you know, environment. And I'm looking at the needle and thinking about how is this possible that this little fucking needle on this, like, you know, running over this ridge, you know, through everyone's concern to make sure that it could happen, we were able to do it. You know, it's able to transmit this information to all these people anyway. So I've always had just like a natural curiosity about vinyl and just an amazement at it, you know. But, you know, by 2005, 2008, I might be a little fuzzy on the time, but, you know, by the late noughts, a lot of pressure to kind of switch over, you know. You know, let's embrace new technology, or look what's possible with CDJs. A lot of, frankly, and, you know, and look, I'm just going to keep it real. A lot of DJs switch to CDJs because playing on vinyl's hard. So that is a part of the reason a lot of your old school DJs aren't, you know, like, well, I wonder why they don't stick with vinyl. Well, because they can do a cleaner mix with a CDJ. You don't have to carry as much shit around. It's easier. So anyway, my mom, though, because she was an antiques dealer from the time I can remember, was constantly talking to me about the fact that society moves so fast that we had to be careful because what was new wasn't necessarily better. And she'd always like be pointing out the construction. Can't you believe that this is, you know, three times less than what someone would buy in like the nice furniture store. Yet look at how it's actually made. You know, it's about 5 times as nicely made. You know, and she's like, and you know, my mother was an atheist, and the only times she's really touched the spiritual are when she talks about nature and when she talks about her antiques, because she talks about the stories. She's always like, I wonder how did this get it to me? Who would have ever let go of this family picture? How did this object ever make it to me? You know, whose hands made this? So I think I always like had that same feeling of records, because to this day I view records as like ancestor objects, you know, like that's actually someone's creativity that's been etched into a piece of vinyl that, you know, if properly stored, can last many, many times longer than the person. And you say, well, that's music. No, that's an extrusion of their creativity. That is in some sense a simulacrum of an aspect of that person. you know? So there's a lot of energy in the records, I think, because of that. So I always had this romantic and sort of spiritual connection to them. And then my mom giving me this value that maybe just because there's something new doesn't mean you should let go of this way of doing things, you know? And I've always been a little bit pushed against the trend a bit. So the obstructionist in me was a little like, well, I don't know if, you know, I think I'm going to just keep playing my records, you know? When I started touring was the next time I felt a little pressure to maybe change, because I was just struggling that first year because, you know, playing records on big systems is really hard. There's a lot of technical issues, and you have to become a technician of sorts if you want to be a touring artist playing records. I had to learn so much. But I genuinely believe we're only here sitting having this conversation because I've dedicated my life to these objects, you know, because the world has changed around me, and there are fewer and fewer DJs doing this. But I have dedicated the time into it, you know. So at this point, I view it as my craft, and it's hard to imagine doing it any other way. And I feel appreciated for it, which is a nice feeling, because for so long I felt kind of like just almost like a lot of just like negativity about records, and even like pressure from my peers and stuff. So yeah, I don't know. Records have sort of become a badge of honor, I guess, for me in a long life.
Absolutely. Cool.
I'm glad I brought this one. So I couldn't bring all the records that I used to make my kicks, but I did bring a few. So this is a copy of the Sound Lords, and the song is called Off the Wall, and this is the soft mix of the song. So this was on Mystic Bill's probably his most popular tape around 94, 95 called Melody to Mind. And I still remember being in my friend James was staying at like what we would call a rave cave at the time. So it was a bunch of ravers in a cheap apartment all getting into trouble. Having a place to come down and afters. Anyway, so we're all like at an afters at this place, and someone throws on Melody to Mind. This is the first time I'm hearing, you know, one of my two favorite DJs, you know, hearing his new mix for the first time while we're all in a sort of ecstatic, kind of hazy, you know, coming down from the party state. And it's like, I could still remember how this song sounded coming out of that little sound system and the light in the room. So it's like the record's now charged with that memory for me. So, you know, when I play this song, you know, it brings back those memories. So here I am in a kind of pressure environment, you know, you're playing a club, like, you know, maybe I'm dealing with a feedback issue, or maybe, you know, I'm like a little, you know, maybe tired because of flu or, you know, whatever, but then I play something like this and all of a sudden that river of time comes rushing towards me, and then time collapses a little bit because I'm back in that room even though I'm with everybody else in the same space, you know, in the present moment. So it has this collapsing time function, which is like really beautiful. And then, now granted, I didn't have this copy of the record back then, but you know, by putting it on my kicks or by playing it with other people, it then becomes, then the actual object itself starts to become infused with memories. And you know, so I write on my records and put stickers and you know, and like, so they get marked, they travel the world with me, and they become something more than just like another copy on Discogs, if that makes sense. Yeah.
So you want to touch on let's touch on the other one.
Oh, now this is an interesting one, because this one's just starting to get charged, but it's getting charged quick. It's got this is a group, Eskimos in Egypt, and the name of the song is Fall from Grace. And this is a Moby remix that we were able to secure for the kicks, which was one of the most exciting moments for me when I was looking at the licensing list, the approvals that we got back, because I mean, getting a Moby remix is, you know, kind of a big deal. And he's definitely one of my favorite artists. I came across this record in a shop. Maya thinks I might have even found it here at Bikini Waxx, but I don't have a specific memory of actually buying it. But it was recently. It was in 2024. Now, the vocal in the song goes, I take it to the, wait, sorry, I want to say it right. Maya?
Yeah?
Is it, I take it to the human race as we fall from grace?
Just take it to the human race.
Yes.
As we fall from
Okay. So let me backtrack, okay. So the lyric from the track, like the main lyric from the track is, I take it to the human race as we fall from grace. So, as I'm experiencing the world as it is now, the Trump election, the genocide in Palestine, the, all the violence and everything that's happening in the world, ecological collapse, the utter cruelty that we hoist upon our animal population. To take this song that people think is kind of sexy and sort of amazing and gets them excited, but to have this message that is honest about the situation we're in, has made it for me a very potent record. And I feel it's when everyone is happy and everyone is feeling some relief, I feel there's an honesty in it, because the rave alone is not going to save anything. Here we are dancing as we fall from grace. We must take what the Motherbeat kind of shows us and try to change something in the world. Try to not fall from grace. Because this is a song about eschatology. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a song about the end of the world. At least this Moby kind of frames it in this fun remix, this kind of tribal remix. So I wanted the mix to have meaning, and I want my sets to contain context and have meaning. So finding tracks like this is really magical. And this one's now been charged with these memories where I felt like I could acknowledge in some honest way some of my darker, more complex feelings through this record. I don't remember the first kicks I encountered, but what's important and what was important to me in the 90s was the way it documented the Midwest DJs that I was seeing at the raves all the time. I still remember Stacy Pullen playing live. I still remember seeing Kenny Larkin. I very specific sets, very specific moments. Claude Young Jr., these artists were all memorialized in a way I don't know that they otherwise would have been through these K7 projects in the mid to late 90s. And it's been cool because Maya and I have gone back and tried to actually get copies, because my copies of things came and went over the years, and sometimes I would just listen to friends. So we've gone back to get a lot of the 90s kicks and go back and listen through them. The other day I had actually a teaching moment through one. I was I'm trying to remember. I think I was listening to, I think it was Stacy Pullen's. But there's this I think it's called Funkdefino by Gypsy. It's this progressive house track that I absolutely love, but I never play because I hate the vocal. Straight up, it's a vocal that does not work for me. So I'm listening to his mix, and I'm like, wait, it doesn't have the vocal. So Maya and I go on the search. Let's find the version without the vocal. It doesn't exist. He did what a good old school DJ does. It's a nice long track. He cued it after the first time the vocal happens, mixed out after the last time vocal happens. I'm like, you've literally not been playing this track when you could have been doing that very same thing. You do the same things with some of your other record. I'm gonna mix out before this happens or whatever. So it was cool because it was like I said, a teaching moment from the past. Here's someone I looked up to when I was young. All this time could remind me or show me something, remind me of something, 30 years later. That's really important. A technical thing, but still an important thing because I'm gonna play that song now. Sometimes my friend and my agent, my musical confidant in a sense, Alex, he and I will talk about the future, and I hit a certain point a few years ago where I'd, sort of built it up so I was playing all the time and able to tour and things. And he was like, well, if you could do anything, what would you do? And I had a couple things, and the DJ Kicks was like one of, I think, 3 things on that like bucket list, I guess you would say. So when y'all asked me to do it, it was a dream come true. As part of doing a DJ Kicks, you do some exclusive tracks for it, or ask your your friends or peers to do some, and so to have it. They're not on vinyl yet, so what do you do, right? So we had to get unique copies made of these exclusive tracks so that I could do the mix on all vinyl. So I wouldn't have to mix these songs written just for the compilation off of like a USB or something. But, getting a plate made when you're living in New Hampshire, USA isn't always the easiest thing. Like, if you're living in London, there's a few places that'll make you a custom record, basically, is what it is. So I called up Carl Rawati from True Tone, who is, he's been cutting records since the 60s. He first learned to cut before there were even stereo cuts, so he learned in the mono era. He's all over like house music pressings from the 90s, so he has a lot of experience with dance music too, even though he's cut all different kinds of music. But it's important to have a mastering engineer who knows about the sort of weights of dance music when they're going to cut a record. But at any rate, so Carl's an OG, and he's been mastering our records for a few years now. So I called him on and I said, Carl, I don't know if can you do a custom cut for me in acetate? He's like, of course. I do reference discs. And I knew he did reference discs, but I didn't know the reference disc was the same thing as like the acetate. So Carl he put, each song is on one disc, which is kind of cool. And the discs are incredibly fragile. They're called lacquers for a reason. It's literally like the same material that's on my fingernails, and it's that delicate. So you're gonna cut a diamond or other sharp needle through nail polish. So on his end, he's working with a very delicate substrate, and it's really tricky to get what's called a good cut, because he's, so there was a lot of risk here. I was super nervous that the cuts were gonna come back not sounding as loud and as clear as the commercially manufactured records that I was gonna use. Now, of course, I picked someone of eminent skill, but there's always gonna be some kind of degradation from doing it with this process. So we unboxed Carl's lacquers when Carl's acetates when they arrived, and the terminology here gets confusing because a lacquer is also part of making a commercial record too. But anyway, these acetates arrived, and we put the needle on them, and they're just pristine. I've had a few other acetates for things. I've never had any sound this good. So it was really cool to get those and to just have them sound so good. So and just to have these like unique copies, these one-of-a-kind reference discs of these songs that Maya and I wrote, that's really cool. Cabin dance is cool, and I would say kind of unique for Octo Octa because, Maya's productions are very, very layered and very, very lush, and this was her really just focusing on the sort of drums and the fundamental resonance that underlie a lot of her music, but really putting that up front. And in a sense, it's like a stripped back, pure Motherbeat, because it's just rhythm, just resonance. And so you're getting kind of the core of the source sort of in this track. So I was like, oh my God, yes. I would love to have something that I, could kind of take people into that like sort of direct place, and because it is kind of stripped back and there's no vocals and there's no orchestration, that then let me orchestrate it with other things, which was, like why DJ tools are so cool, You'd all ask me, could you get some exclusives? And it's like, I'm just not one of these DJs that plays off promos. you know? Music has to come to me in kind of serendipitous ways. So I was like, there's only like 1 or 2 people I would really approach on this level, because it's not like just about finding a song I like. That's easy. I know a lot of producers whose music I love. It's about finding that song that should be on this mix. And you know, you don't want to ask someone to send you 5 songs and then maybe none of them are, you know. So I was like, I knew with Maya we have such a trust and love between us, and I love her music so much that I could ask her that without any chance of like it not working out, and you know, and maybe it not feeling good. So there is a kind of safe space between us. So you mix that pragmatic need with that safe space, and you know, but of course, like, to have her represented on the mix does mean a lot to me. I mean, she is my partner. Like, we're each other's muse sometimes. At this point, we've been playing together so long, talking about music so long. Everything I do has her in it. So let's be explicit about it, you know? Hope in a Smoke-Filled Room is like some kind of point where finally I was just like, had shed and had created that, found that safe space in my studio. And just smoking bongs and just saying, I'm gonna have a subjective moment here, which is just me and this music and this beautiful place I've created, you know, which has got equipment I've had, you know, since I was a teenager in it, that I still use. And you know, we're in the cabin, you know, cabin dance, because we live in a cabin, we live in the forest. So, you know, nature's around me. There's nothing more kind of disconnecting than spending your times in airports and restaurants and hotels, as amazing as the events are, you know. So yeah, so Hope in a Smoke-Filled Room is me indulging the subjective and acknowledging, in some sense, I guess, just like the joy of just having a day where I could just kind of cook and make music. And yeah, usually my song titles are kind of a they're usually a metaphor, so it's usually reflecting something that I think is real about the music, which is what you're describing, but also something that's actually going on in my life. So something about my own subjective experience or life. And I usually like to be an open book, but I have to say I was going through something personally that was really difficult and strange. I was going through a momentary phase transition related to like health and physiology. And so when I wrote this song was when I was experiencing this, and the song seemed to capture that feeling that I was experiencing going through this, which is why I named it Momentary Phase Transition. Well, to use a metaphor, I wanted it to feel like you're climbing a mountain, and that at some point you reach that summit, because there's a bittersweetness in the mix. And I think life is, if we're being honest, life is bittersweet. You know, we have moments of pure joy. We have moments of pure sadness, you know, but most of life is, the true human psyche is actually far more complex than these two sort of binaries. So I think in order for a mix to make you feel elevated, or to make you feel like, I don't know, like you could go out and do something or something, you know, I think it has to be honest about the bittersweetness, the bitter part of it too. So even though I think the mix is kind of funky and like happy and stuff, you know, like the Sound Lords is a really good example. And you know, it's partially just the key it's in, but there's almost like a little bit of like a sadness in that song. You know, we were talking about charging the records, you know, a lot of my friends that were in that room that day went through a lot of hard times after we listened to that song together in that room. So a lot of those tracks on the mix have been charged with both the difficulties I've faced in life and my feelings of overcoming them, or just a human desire to persist, you know? So since a lot of these songs are my favorite songs, they carry that weight with them. So I guess I hope the mix carries that kind of weight for people. Does that make sense? Like, I don't know, is that okay?